right, good evening, Source Nation, and welcome to SRN Live Television. I am your host, Author Kimberly McLemore, and thank you for tuning in tonight to my show, The Author's Corner. Tonight we have another amazing show in store for you, but before I go any further, let me thank our sponsors who have made this show possible, and they are Zulina Health and Wellness and Fitness, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Renovations and New Covenant of Praise Worship Center. And now let me also just take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about myself and the show. I am author Kimberly McLemore, author of How to Be a Success by Just Being You, and memoir, Deception of the Heart, A Real Look into Domestic Violence. I am also the founder and CEO of the Women's Small Business Initiative, LLC, and the host of the podcast, Your Resource for Success, which is on iHeartRadio and Spotify. I'm also the founder of Author Kimberly M. McLemore, LLC, and the host, of course, of this new phenomenal radio TV show called The Author's Corner. The reason why that I decided to have this new show is because I really wanted to give a new platform for new or existing authors and give them an opportunity to promote their book, of course, talk about their events. And of course, we want to know a little bit about why they decided to do it. And then also we need to know where can we find the book at, right? So let me just tell you a little bit about our guest, Author Shannon Griffin. Author Shannon Griffin is the co-founder of For Humanities, an online t-shirt brand that designs and creates socially conscious t-shirts that provide a platform for your inner activists to be seen, and is the co-author of the anthology titled The Smell of Poverty. So without further ado, Source Nation, please help me welcome my special guest, Shannon Griffin. Hello, Shannon. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm just so glad that we got the opportunity to finally meet.
Right.
And I'm just excited about you being on the show tonight. So
Right.
Tell us a little bit about who you are before we dive into the actual book itself.
Okay. Well, I am Shannon. And of course, I am here and born and raised here on the West Coast, born and raised in Oakland, California, AKA the town. So I am the youngest of 6 children. And, and it's great, being the youngest of 6. I mean, I wasn't spoiled or anything. So, hey, growing up in poverty, it's like, everybody, we got to figure it out. So who I am as a whole, I am, of course, a woman of God, but first and foremost, and I am an activist. I am an artist. I'm a designer. I am a social worker by profession, and also, a designer by education. And I'm just an all-around, just fun person.
That's good. And I see that. And you are quite the busy person too, right? I did do my research and reviewed, all your information. I was like, okay, what do I really want to focus on? Because you have a whole lot to talk about. But of course, you're here on the Author's Corner show. So we definitely talk about the book itself. So explain to me, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the t-shirts, because I'm sure the t-shirts have a whole lot to do with what it is that with the book itself and how it all came together. I'm assuming. So kind of tell me a little bit about your t-shirt design. And then, I know you said you brought some t-shirts so we can all see it.
Yes. So as it started, For Humanities, of course, as you did the wonderful introduction, we design t-shirts, but it's primarily socially conscious. So nonprofit is also my background. Been in nonprofit for over 25 years. So nonprofit is what I look like. So things that I do look nonprofit. So the concept of the t-shirts is to support socially conscious things that are definitely against the grind, where it's dealing with community. And so when we do that, we do it through fashion, because we know fashion has always been seen as a platform to be able to get a lot of information out. Mm-hmm. So the t-shirt business was definitely something that my co-partner and she kind of came up with it. There's this backstory to this whole thing. We weren't always called For Humanities in the beginning, and that's a story all by itself. Okay. But we became For Humanities, and the goal was to help nonprofits and to fundraise for nonprofits and then people, schools that needed that extra support that they normally wouldn't get. So we would help them through these t-shirts to do the fundraising. And as time went on, just built the platform up. connecting with people and supporting them with nonprofit fundraisers and t-shirt fundraisers to support community and raise funds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I love the name For Humanities, and when I seen that, I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting. So you got a T-shirt with you. Can we see the T-shirt?
Yes, I will show you this t-shirt. This is our The Smell of Poverty t-shirt. So
Awesome.
as you can see, the design of the t-shirt, and once I show you the book, is pretty much the same. And that's just kind of like how the design was done to couple it with not only your book, but
Mm-hmm.
also with a shirt. And we have actually a mug too, like a cup, but I don't have the cup
Okay.
yet.
That's cool. That is good. So you talked a little bit about in the beginning about your childhood. You have a
Right,
very pretty large family, and you mentioned the word poverty.
right,
So I'm sure that with the book that you have, The Smell of Poverty, for one thing, that is an extremely interesting name, The Smell of
yeah,
Poverty.
right.
Explain to me, what does that mean to you, and how all this coordinates together with your family and the other co-authors that helped with this book.
Right. Now, The Smell of Poverty definitely was is a name that, definitely God beamed this down, because I was live as I was talking about it and when it came up. And the way it came up is I was talking about Survive and Thrive, which is a platform that I do to support cancer survivors. Because I'm a cancer survivor, was diagnosed in 15. And when I was talking about the sponsor letter that I was asking for funds to support the event, I shared a little bit about my story. And I shared that despite the fact that I was battling cancer and dealing with my own life, I was still continuously to provide and come live and share my journey with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I also shared that as a child born into poverty, that I got into social work because I had a worker that came to my house and she took us to the circus, and I've never forgot it. And I've always wanted to be a social worker to help a child like me to be able to come, and it's kind of like, if you will, a rescue, come and save, children who are by no choice of their own, going through poverty and living in poverty, no food, no clothes, being
Right.
homeless, and that whole journey. So I went into social work because I wanted to be that social worker that came and took some child to the circus that they never thought they would be able to go. So as I was sharing the story that of the words that I put in my sponsor letter, what I was telling sponsors, this is who I am and where I come from. I shared on live that poverty has a smell. And in the business that I do with social work and working with supportive services, I smell it. I've smelled it through the clients that I work with. I've smelled it through, family members. I've smelled it through this people. And I was sharing that poverty has a smell and it's all the same. No matter who the person is,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same smell. If you smell it. And so as we went live, I talked about it and I said, the smell of poverty, and people just was chiming in, told their stories. And I said, well, you know what? Let's do a book. And it's called The Smell of Poverty. And then everybody just was like, yes, let's do it. And thus, that's when The Smell of Poverty came about.
Wow. And like I said, that's a powerful name and it just stands out. And so I really wanted to get that synopsis and understanding of how did you come up with that. And the way you're explaining it, and I will be honest, I don't know anything about being impoverished. I've never had to live in that world. I obviously come from a background, a very well background, but at the same time, my parents lived in that smell of poverty that you're talking about. And of course, as they raised us coming up, they wanted things completely different for us. So I do remember growing up and my father would always take us on a Sunday drive, and he would always take us in the area where he grew up and how he lived. But it really didn't resonate until, of course, as you become an adult to understand really what poverty is, because I
Mhm.
didn't know what that meant. And he
Right,
was trying to give us that sound foundation of understanding that this is the world I came from and this is what I don't want you guys to have to ever be in. And
right,
to realize that the way you're explaining it, and when I do see a child or an adult that obviously does not have everything that I have or others have, you're right, it does have a distinctive smell.
yeah,
And I just never would have put the two and two together that way, because I don't look at people in a way of how they look, and obviously, we all have a story, and there's reasons why people exist in poverty. There's a multitude of different reasons. So it's, you can't break down the barrier and be like, oh, well, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong. But the way that you came up with that, the name for that book, I mean, it just stands out. And so I guess just tell me briefly about one of the stories before we decide to jump into the book itself and have you read a story. Tell me a little bit about one of the, I don't know if you're using like characters, or do you actually use the name of the individuals who actually co-authored on this book?
Yeah, they're real people, and they all use their names. And we have one of the stories that is in the book, which I'm going, I could refer to. She is one of the oldest authors alive. Her name is Elizabeth Corcoran, and she is from Ghana. And I got her story, and I'll just show her really quickly. I got her story by way of her granddaughter, who connected with me on social media.
Wow.
And she's here, and she talked about her grandma. And she would just tell the stories of her grandma and being there in Ghana, and then talking about, the door of no return, and how they, saw how slavery and that whole castle, Elmina's castle. And she talked about it, and I was like, wow, this would be wonderful when we finally came up with the book to have her in the story. So one of the things that she just shared about how growing up in Ghana, and when during times of her family members, and when slavery was coming about, and when they were coming there and building that castle, and being aware of that, and how her family members would run into, the jungle or the countryside to get away so that they wouldn't get captured and taken away. And that, of course, as we know, once you've gone into that room of no return, you pass through that door, you did not return. So it was so impactful to me to be able to know someone who lived there and who had family members that were a part of that, and to hear her story of growing up, of having, children, and how they would die on the back of her when she was traveling from one parts of the land to the next to find water and food. So, I just thought it was just a wonderful thing to be able to have that history of having her in this book, and having that story of an author that's 120 years old.
Wow.
And to be in this book. So I was like, to be able to read and to be a part of listening to her story, because she doesn't speak English, or her granddaughter had to interpret for her, tell me what it is that she wanted to share. So that in itself is what was really wonderful. And to hear about how her family were, they worked the lands, they were farmers, and that's what they did, and they grew their food. And how right now they grow their food, they get their food every day, they don't put it in the refrigerators and things like that. They get it right there from the water and grow it. And so I just thought that was amazing, just to have that story here in this book, and to hear about that story from her, and someone who's living in Ghana and know and have all of that history.
Yeah, that is amazing. And the difference of how poverty is seen from another country versus ours. I think that's the part that stands out the most for me. And because we're not familiar with that type of poverty, even though we have poverty here in the United States, we can still get help. We can still turn to the corner and say, hey, can you feed me? Can you give me this? Can you give me that? It's not so simple for other countries to do. So to have a story like that so powerful, to be able to understand that every day of their life, they still go through the same process every single day. And for us, like you said, we could turn out, go into the refrigerator, and if we run out of something, we could turn around and go get more help. And that's not always necessarily available for everybody else. So very powerful. And it's definitely a blessing that you were able to get this woman into your book. That's phenomenal. But before we go any further, if you're just tuning in, I'm telling you, you've already missed some great information about Miss Shannon Griffin. But of course, if you are listening, we're live here at the Author's Corner, and I am author Kimberly McLemore. And like I said, I have my special guest here, Author Shannon Griffin, and she's telling her story. And the one thing I want to do next, Shannon, is that I would like for you to tell me or talk to me a little bit about your story in the book.
Right. Well, again, thank you for having me, and thank everyone who's watching. Again, I am Shannon with For Humanities, and I'm just kind of show you guys the book. So this is the Smell of Poverty book, just so you guys can see it. Hopefully I got it in the right location.
You do.
But
You
one of
do.
the things is, thank you, the part that I share in the book is definitely speaking from me as a child, growing up in poverty, being born into poverty. So when I was born, I was in poverty. So that's what, that's what I knew. And I grew up in that fashion. But fortunately, to the fact of, everyone being able to go to school and everyone being able to see what could be, I was able to know that poverty was not my final destination. So when I talk about the story that I share in the book was growing up, in Oakland, and what they would call, West Oakland or Dogtown, where everyone was in poverty. Everyone was in poverty where I lived growing up as the youngest of six. And, my mom was a single mother and she had six children and raising us all in poverty. So it was definitely a struggle in being able to see just different things that that wasn't quite right. Or, growing up like in Oakland, there's an area called San Pablo. San Pablo is back in those days was an area where prostitutes would walk. So I was exposed to prostitutes. I saw prostitutes when I was a young child. I didn't know exactly what they were and what they did. I just would see them out walking the street in heels and late at night with makeup on. So as a child, you would think that that was like, oh, look at those fancy girls. You know,
Right.
they're
Right.
they got makeup on and heels and everything. But after a while, you learned what prostitutes were, because you would see the pimps and you would see them out there hitting the girls, or they stand out there and they walking up to cars all the time. And eventually you learn what that is and what's going on. I share a little bit here in the book about, again, generational poverty. And my mom, she come from, 14 siblings, and they were, born in Arkansas. So my family's from back south. And looking at how and by way we came to California was, from, Arkansas and coming to Seattle. And then I'm the only child that was born here in California.
Okay.
All my other siblings are in Arkansas or in Washington. But, I share a little bit about, growing up in Oakland, seeing, the lights of different things that were going on, Black Panthers that were going on during that time when I was growing up. And just seeing how poverty was. And as a child, you're like, okay, this is it. This is all you knew. But whenever you would see others that had more than you always, you wanted to have that, like the basic necessities of food, PG&E, water running, those things. And realizing that, being subjected to that as I am an adult, I know how to make some things happen, if
Right.
something was to happen. So I understand the resiliency of, being poor and how to make things happen regardless of what you're working with. So, so I kind of just go over that and just share, like, seeing Huey P. Newton, that would be in Oakland at the time of when he
Wow.
was, kind of like not at his best,
Right.
but he was there and knowing and being around when he got shot and knowing that. And it was like looking at the state of Oakland of how it was when he did, get shot and what was going on then. So, so I, go into a lot of other things later on as I got older and, being a teen mom and sharing that information too and understanding the cycle of poverty.
Right. And the thing that I'm listening to you talk about that with your story is that, like you said, each generation it's continual for most
Right.
people, but you
Hmm.
figured it out. You
Right.
realize that this is not where I want to be in my life. This is not who I am, and that there's got to be something better out there. There's a lot of them who don't make it out. you know,
No, there
and,
is.
and,
That's
and,
right.
and each generation continues to get worse and get worse because they think this is the life, they don't know any better. And,
Yeah.
so, I applaud you for taking the steps that you felt you needed to take in order to have a better life for yourself. And I'm
Right.
sure that your family is very proud of who you are and what you're accomplishing and what you can continue to do because, like I said, poverty, it definitely has a look. And then, like the way you put it together, saying the smell of poverty, I mean, it really does all come together to give you a real true understanding of what poverty is about. Now, did you want to take just a couple minutes and maybe read a little bit out of your book? Is there anything specific that you might want to point out?
Yeah, I could read a little bit, and just the part here too about living in West Oakland, whereas where we spent most of the years around a generations of adults who were born in the 40s and the 50s and didn't and excuse my language, and didn't give a damn about conforming to the rules. They had seen revolution, wanted to enjoy life despite having children. We lived in poverty, but we didn't realize it until we would go to the refrigerator and get food
Hmm.
and found nothing was there. Poverty was the way of life, but it was the first and the 15th of the month is when we got our life back, because it would look like the entire grocery store left us in abundance, and the food was there for us to eat because you would get your food stamps and you would be able to
Right.
go and buy groceries the 1st and the 15th. So during this time, it was like Christmas twice a month. And if you could only see the smiles on our faces when food would come into the house, you would know that it was one of the happiest moments of our lives, that we had food. And when the lights get cut off, because my mother didn't have the money to pay the bill, we would get plenty of rest because we didn't have nothing to do.
Right.
So it was
Right.
no TV. So, since there was no television to watch, we spent long days outside, and we went to bed early. You could say at that time that was an awful situation to have to live with as a child, and I would have to agree with you. However, when I think about television and the distortion of our realities, I think I'm good. I'm good.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
so that, some of the parts I kind of talk about, and
Hmm.
then going into carnation milk trucks that would come in the neighborhood, and we would resourcefully somehow, go and get milk, chocolate milk. That was the only time we would get chocolate milk because we couldn't afford to get chocolate milk. If we got milk, we got milk, but not
Right.
chocolate. Chocolate
Right.
milk was special. So we would get ice cream from the truck. We were very resourceful. So we would pick lemons from the local neighborhood trees to sell the lemonade. And that was our natural instincts to get money to buy food.
Wow.
So, entrepreneurship has been there by the means of needing to do it to get money because,
Mhm.
so, I'm not necessarily new to entrepreneurship. It's just that, yes, I learned the word, but the concept and the instinct is inherent.
Right.
So, so that's how that went.
Like I said, you got to pat yourself on your back continually because you figured it out. You understood that this is not where you needed to be, and
Right.
the pieces that you just wrote about and or talked about in your book, it just resonates to some of the stories I can remember my father telling us. I
Right.
can remember him telling us how they couldn't, mama couldn't afford, grandma couldn't afford, sweets, so they made sugar sandwiches when they had sugar,
Yeah.
things like that. And I always sat there and I couldn't fathom living that way because we were never had to live that way. So, like you said, just a good meal is so much more appreciative. And my father to this day always talks about there's nothing like having a good meal,
Right.
because those are the things that he did not have in his life. And then you're resonating with the same thought process in your book, talking about having to grow up in that way and thinking the 1st and the 15th was the most important days out of the month, knowing that that was the way that your mom we would take care of and feed your brothers and sisters too. So like I said, your book is phenomenal. I wish we had more time to go through more of the book, but obviously, of course, we're coming to the end of the
Yeah.
show. And, I just really, truly want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to stop
Welcome.
and chat with me for a little bit. Shannon,
You
you're
are welcome.
phenomenal. You're definitely phenomenal. And we definitely want to hear more about the book. And I also want to know, of course, how can we all get a hold of you and where can we find the book at?
Right. Thank you again for having me to be able to share this book. Definitely on the cusp of the next book of 2019, which is The Smell of Poverty, but it talks about the embedded poverty code. So because there is an embedded poverty code that we have submerged down in there of things that our parents would say to us, we can't afford that. We don't have the money. We can't do that. So as we became adults, those are the embedded codes that we would share off to our own children. So now you can find The Smell of Poverty on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And the link you can get it directly from me is bit.ly/The Smell of Poverty. And again, that's bit.ly/The Smell of Poverty. So it's just straight with the name, The Smell of Poverty. And you can, get your copy of it and signed. You can get it from me. You
That's
can,
right. Autograph. That's right. That's
yeah,
the best way to get it, right?
right, exactly.
Oh, well, like I said, again, it's a pleasure having you on, and definitely need to bring you back when you get the second book out, because we
Yes, thank
got to
you.
continue the story, because like I said, it's a good one to talk about, and it probably still can exist today, every
Yeah,
single day, so people do need to understand that there's definitely a way out. And I
yeah,
think your next book is going to provide some of that great information. So we're going to be looking forward to you coming back. And again, like I said, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And for
yeah,
everyone else here at Source Nation, hey, I just want to say, if you missed out on this, you have to come back and listen to the replay, because Author Shannon Griffin has a phenomenal story to tell. Talks about her great t-shirts, and her book, of course, is absolutely something to definitely review and get for yourself, because like I said, poverty still exists. It's
right,
nothing that's going to go away overnight, but we need to teach our families that there's definitely something more out there. So
right.
again, thank you. And Source Nation, of course, before I leave, I definitely have to do our sponsors again. We like to thank Zulino Health, Wellness, and Fitness, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Renovations, and New Covenant of Praise Worship Center. And again, of course, if you'd like to be a guest on my show, all you need to do is send me a short bio, a copy of the book cover, and a professional picture of yourself. Make sure you send it to Kimberly M. McLemore at gmail.com. That's KIMBERLY MCLEMORE at gmail.com. You can also follow me on all the social media platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, you name it, I'm there, and Instagram. And follow me through Women's Small Business Initiative as well, and author Kimberly McLemore. So until next time, though, you all, please have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you soon. And we're out. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.